You too, bud. Is this working over there?
You have to press down.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, we're going to hear from the Georgia Port Authority, and we're.
Okay.
It's not working.
It's okay. I think we have the handout, so I'll just use the screen here, and if y'all want
I'm sorry, we
follow
should have
through.
gotten it fixed at lunch, and we just got busy.
That's fine.
It's not working.
It's temperamental.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. He's already come in here one time. But we're glad to have Bart Goebel and Lee Beckman here, and Lee looks after all the legislators, and we appreciate that. And Bart, appreciate you coming in
Thank you,
and give us a report on the ports.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us here. We're glad to be here, and y'all know Lee, and thank you for his introduction as well. He's up here day to day, so if you have issues or questions, please feel free to track him down. So first thing, I just wanted to thank you, members of the General Assembly, the full committee, and the Governor's office as well, for your continued support of the Port Authority. We have a great story to tell. Lee and I probably get asked about 4 or 5 times a week to come speak to a Rotary or come, do a tour, and so we're proud to do that. So if you have constituents who want to come on by as a civic group, we'll be more than happy to facilitate that. We're proud to show off what we're doing, and we can only do it because of the strong support of the Georgia General Assembly. And please feel free, as always, to ask questions and as we go along. So if you want to just kind of continue, I'm on the second slide. This is just kind of an overview of the different things we'll cover today. Economic engine, terminals, what we're doing to prepare for tomorrow, a little bit about the Panama Canal, what we're seeing from the industry, and then our harbor expansion, the SHEP program, which is the deepening project. The Georgia Ports Authority, we are an economic engine for the state. That's in our bylaws, that's in our mission statement. All we do when people ask us what we do, we move boxes from point A to point B. Really not too much to it. It's very complicated on the technical IT side of things, but we help drive business. And so as a result, we have about a $1.3 billion, we add $1.3 billion in state taxes alone for the products going through the port in 1 year. Support about 370,000 jobs in the state of Georgia. We realize that the port doesn't stop at the Chatham County line or the Glenn County line, or soon to be the Murray County line. We go well beyond that and reach into Atlanta, we reach into rural Georgia, reach into the farm community of our state as well, and help support that as much as we can. On the next slide, we have 5 deep water terminals in Georgia. Ocean Terminal, that's if you're on River Street in downtown Savannah underneath the Talmadge Bridge. You'll see a facility right there. That's Ocean Terminal. Colonel's Island, Mayor's Point, and East River, those are all in Brunswick. And then Garden City is the big one. It's about 85% of our business, and that's in Savannah. That's kind of what Savannah. People think Savannah ports and terminals. That's the big, as we call it, the golden goose. Lee, can you grab one more presentation there, please? Okay. Alrighty. Next slide, we're talking about our autos. We've done a tremendous job recently as a state of attracting auto business, not only from the headquarters and things like Kia, but also around from manufacturers in the secondary businesses and assembly plants and things that, and other entities that support that. So as a result, we've grown tremendously in Brunswick. We are the second largest U.S. auto port in the United States, behind Baltimore. Jacksonville does 1.25 million tons. We do 1.25. Jacksonville's been pretty aggressive. They are kind of our big brother or big cousin for a while, and we've grew up and moved past them, and so they're trying to get a little bit of business back. They've actually gone out and bought some business. They bought one of our customers, 5-year deal, about $17 million cash. It just doesn't make any financial sense, and so we're not going to do things like that. What we do is we take our money. We actually paved 100 more acres down in Brunswick to help our current customers to make sure that they have a place to call home for their vehicles for the next couple of years. Garden City Terminal, that's the largest single terminal, we like to say now, in the Western Hemisphere. If you go to other terminals up and down the East Coast, they'll have multiple different terminals. Charleston has 5 or 6, New York has 7 or 8. We have one big terminal, about 1,200 acres, the Garden City Terminal. That enables us to really kind of have some efficiency gains through what we do. We have grown tremendously over the past 10 years. We're the fastest growing. We still are the fastest growing port in the United States. We've grown at a compounded annual growth rate of 7%. We've beaten Houston, New York, New Jersey. And what we really love about this slide is that as we've grown and become the fourth largest port in the United States, that base is that much larger, but we're still growing annually in that compounded growth rate at an exorbitant rate. And what we really are kind of proud of here too is once we serve a customer, they stick with us. We had an incident last 2 years ago, which we'll go on to the next slide. If you look in 2014, we handled 3.14 million units, and then 2015, we moved up to about 17% growth to 3.7 million units. This is as a result of a labor unrest on the West Coast. And so as a result, a lot of traffic moved over to the East Coast. And so as you can see from this slide, we retained 24% of that diverted cargo. That's key to us because once people saw what we do, and I don't want to say it's us, once people saw what the state of Georgia's done, because we're only as good as a logistics hub as the whole system. It's kind of the weakest link theory. And you can get your product off the ship onto the terminal and get it out of the gate, but you need to go somewhere else. You need to have good roads. You need to have great infrastructure. You need to have logistics facilities in Savannah, in Atlanta, in McDonough. To help serve those areas. So once people kind of came in and had a little bit of taste of what we were offering as a state of Georgia, from tax incentives, from a great state to do business for the fourth year in a row, people stuck with us, and so we're proud of that. We can't really do it alone though. What I like to say during our discussions is that in Georgia we're always looking not only just to the next cycle, we're looking a generation ahead, whether it's Hartsfield, whether it's 285, these other massive infrastructure projects around the state. We're looking out 20 years down the road. And we're now being able to take advantage of what folks did 20 years ago and then investing for the next 20 years so somebody else will be able to take advantage of that. And we can only do that through continued investment into our system. So on the next slide, what we'd like to do is have a little bit of gap on our growth in our capacity. We say it's about 20%-ish, which really means that if we, like we just saw 2 years ago, we saw a massive influx of business, we're able to handle that. I'd like to say we build our church for Easter Sunday, and our congregation is just growing and growing and growing each year, so we can handle that crowd, and we can handle it when it's really busy, and we can handle that capacity. We have a little bit of slack as we're planning out 15, 20 years down the road, but we're going to grow and build into that. We can only do that because we're investing about $187 million of our own revenue that's produced at the Port Authority a year. We take our revenue and put it back into the system. We put it back into building more roads inside of our gates. We purchase more cranes. On the next slide, we just had 4 new cranes show up in Savannah. Next year we have 4 more cranes. These are the big cranes. If you're in downtown Savannah, you see those big kind of goose-looking cranes up River Street. Up the Savannah River. These are these massive cranes. These cranes that we just had delivered, they cost about $11 million a piece. So we bought 4, and then we went back to the producer about 2 years ago and said, we're going to double down, and we're going to buy 4 more. So we'll get another 4 next year. So you can imagine the dollar was at a good rate, steel was at a good rate, the labor was at a good rate. So we bought 4, so at about $45 million total amount of money. So, and then the ones below that, these are our RTGs, rubber tied gantry cranes. Those cost about $1 million a piece. So it's a heavy industrial complex out there, and so we can only do that as long as we take all of that, the revenue we produce, and put it back into our system. Panama Canal. Why are we doing all this? Panama Canal, the expansion is really changing things. It's also the Suez Canal too. The Suez Canal is expanded, and as a result, the Panama Canal went and was doing their expansion. Actually, it was the other way around. And so these ships are becoming bigger. Right now, in the past, we had ships that show up that can handle about 4,000 units on them. The ships that we're getting in now handle about 13,000 units themselves. So we're going to see in the future less ships, but more cargo. And as a result, we need the equipment there to handle these massive ships. Those cranes I just spoke of, they are about 180 feet high. They'll be able to reach over 22, if you think about it when you're on I-16 or 75, you see the trucks with Maersk on the side. 22 of those units lined up on the back of a ship. Our cranes will be able to go out and reach at high tide across those to unload product coming in and going out. So this is kind of this is why we need to obviously deepen the harbor in Savannah, and I'll get into that a little bit as well. This is on the next slide that we have with the labeled big ships are already calling. These 10,000 TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. That's what we kind of our lowest common denominator to kind of measure things. It's 2 of those trucks you see equals a TEU, basically. So what we see here is that we have now receiving these massive ships. They were milk run. They don't just stop in Savannah and go back to Shanghai, come back to Savannah. They go to New York, Norfolk, Savannah, Busan, Korea, Shanghai, Singapore. So they all kind of string out and go to different stops, all on one kind of route. And so what you're seeing here on this slide is that we want to be a gateway into the Southeast and into the Midwest as well. And so by these massive ships calling on New York, Norfolk, and Savannah, and not our competition in the Southeast, we're starting to see that. We're starting to see that evolve where Savannah is the choice of call. So our customers are the shipping lines. Their customers are Target or the exporters in the United States. We've gone to their customers and said, you really need to come into Savannah. You need to tell the ship to stop in Savannah. And so that's kind of how we've been able to really drive a lot of business, because the retailers see the value in getting their product to the market. So we're really excited about the opportunity here to continue to evolve into the gateway port into the United States. Sam, this is what I was talking about. So if you come to Savannah, we'll put you on a ship, but maybe not this one. Yeah, and I didn't drive this one when I moved down to Savannah from Atlanta. The industry itself is kind of going in turmoil. And as I mentioned, our customers are the shipping lines. They're the big companies, Maersk, MSC, these international kind of conglomerate companies. In the race when the Panama Canal was announced on their expansion, in the race to build those ships and to be the first, they just threw money after money after money, hundreds of millions of dollars to build these ships out. These ships cost roughly about 80 to 110 million dollars a piece. If you wanted to buy a big ship now, you could probably get it on the secondary market for about 20 million. Now, what you're going to do with it, I don't know. If you want to drive it off the coast for a little bit and up and down, and have fun with it. But so you see that they've overexpanded. They've spent more money. As a result, the industry is in some disarray. And so we kind of put out some numbers. These are our customers. And I'm not the accountant. I studied political science in school, but even I know red's not good. And so when you see a lot of these red numbers pop up, both on their net change, but obviously more in the operating profit on the right side of this slide, when you have Hyundai losing $342 million in 1/2 of a year, that's not good. And so what happens as a result is, number one, first thing we do is we tighten up our belts and we tell our financial people, watch those deliverables, watch what the money coming in the door, make sure that we're on these folks as cleanly and as quickly as we possibly can be. We had one customer, as our 7th largest customer, they went bankrupt this past fall. We'll probably end up with about a $3.5 million tab. As a result, we had that in our reserves. That was kind of put away as bad debt. It's unfortunate, kind of part of doing business sometimes. But now that that's being cleaned up as a Korean company, so you can imagine just the bankruptcy laws and the regulations and everything else you had to deal with, and people didn't own the containers on the ship. It was kind of a Gordian knot to fix. But we don't feel very confident that we'll get anything out of the bankruptcy judge. But as a result, we really need to kind of maintain and shore up again our bad debt reserves. We'll probably go back into that same figure. Obviously it's proportional about what the business is and everything else. But we'll probably end up just kind of having to write that down a little bit next year. So that's kind of where we are. On that front, hopefully it'll get better. We'll see some consolidation within the industry. You'll have some of the weaker players kind of fall off. The guess is who are those weaker players, and what's the impact going to be. So our financial people are constantly watching these numbers out the door. And to that, I just want to kind of share you, and before I get into the harbor deepening project, some of our competitors. And when we talk about the investment that we've made into the system, we're very fortunate to have the support of the General Assembly in a number of ways. And one of the things we don't do is come to the General Assembly and ask for funds on our operating side of things and some of our capital improvements. We ask obviously for more money for SHEP and for the harbor deepening project. But when we invest in our cranes and into our infrastructure, in South Carolina, their CEO in a Wall Street Journal article last year was quoted as saying, "There's just not enough public sector debt available to fund all the infrastructure and terminal improvements we need." So they're going to the market. They're now looking at pension funds. They're looking at different opportunities to invest and to see how they can become competitive again with us. Virginia bailed out their port to the tune of $350 million last year, one-time check, just out of their bond budget. And that's on top of the $40 million that's spent and sent to the Virginia Port Authority every year out of the general fund. This past Thanksgiving, Pennsylvania announced a $300 million cash infusion into the Philadelphia port. And that's just to catch up on all their infrastructure projects. So they're starting to see what we're doing, and they're a little bit jealous, and we're ready for the next kind of shot across the bow, no pun intended. Now onto our project, the Harbor Deepening Project, SHEP. The state has funded $266 million for the $706 million project over the years. Federal government needs to put up its share. Right now they've put about $100 million on the table through a couple of different avenues. With the way the way that the federal government has operated over the past couple of years has been a little bit frustrating from a planning purposes. Where you have a continuing resolution, you're not sure, you can't put money in the budget for this, you can't do certain things for that. You're relying on the Corps of Engineers to come up with the funds to deepen the nation's harbors and waterways. For instance, this past year, the Corps had $100 million total for all deepening projects in the United States, harbor deepening projects. Savannah is the #1 priority right now. And we had about $26 million of that $100 million. So think of all the money the federal government's spending on different projects and different opportunities in the past. That's where the money's been going. So we're behind the 8 ball a little bit on that. We don't know with the new administration, the new Congress, what they'll do. There's a continuing resolution that's put out until April. That'll put us probably at another maybe $40 million if that's continued through the next federal fiscal year. And so we'll continue to watch on that front. It's vital to us that the state has put up its money because we can start projects. The Corps of Engineers is about 13% of the way through the whole project, but the channel extension is a $100 million project itself, and they're about 34% of the way there. So that's if you're on Tybee and you look out 12 miles, that's to deepen the harbor on that front. So there's a bunch of different projects working on being at the same time. The last project will be that inner harbor deepening, and that'll be about a $200 million hit. So it's incumbent upon our congressional delegation and the current or the future administration really to pony up. It's a federal waterway under the Constitution of the United States. It's their obligation with a cost share to the locals, which is the state of Georgia. And so we're going to continue to press, and ask you when you come across delegation members, please help us in that message if you're so inclined. And also we want to thank the General Assembly for what it's done on freight mobility. It's been a tremendous help to us. As I said earlier, we can only do certain things, and we can only do it quickly if you can't get out of the gate or can't get in the gate to move your shipment throughout the world. It means nothing. So with the General Assembly stepping up on the transportation bill 2 years ago, it's helped us out tremendously. We opened up the Jimmy DeLoach connector. That wasn't part of the transportation tax. It was separately a couple years ago in a bond package. But that has taken 5,000 trucks off a kind of a city road and put it on a 4-lane limited access highway right off of our terminal. We're able to go and tell our customers that you have a gateway leaving I-95 and I-16 right into our terminal. Our competitors, you have to go about 40 miles off of a highway to kind of go through city streets and in a neighborhood and through grandmothers' neighborhoods as well to get to the terminal. So we want to use this opportunity to thank you for everything that you've done on that front. Inland terminals. We have obviously the Port of Atlanta. Cordeal, which we've worked with those folks for about 4 or 5 years now. It's a great opportunity to serve agricultural community in Georgia. They've also signed an agreement with Kia, and so they're actually now railing equipment from Savannah to Cordeal and then trucking it to Cordeal to West Point to the Kia manufacturing facility. And then also Murray County, it's the Appalachian Regional Port. We've just broke ground. It's obviously up in northwest Georgia. It's about a $25 million project. We hope to have it complete in about a year, a little over a year. That'll take about an estimated 40,000 trucks off the road a year. So the kind of trick is, we have these containers, and if they only move when they move one way and they're only full one way, they still have to pay to get back. So if we can move them inland a little bit, and then tell somebody, hey, you're a manufacturer selling widgets into China, load up on this in this truck here or this car here, and then we'll put it on the rails and then get it to Savannah and then out to its destination. We do have plans for future inland terminals around the state. Nothing's been announced yet. We've had a lot of interest, as you can imagine, from across the state. And so we'll kind of take a look. I think our next one will probably be in the northeast Georgia area, but that's yet to be determined. And that's it. We got a bright future ahead of us. We can only do it with the support of you all, and we thank you very much. And as I said, if there's anything that we can do, don't hesitate to call upon Lee or call upon me. We're more than happy to tell our story, and we can only do it with all your support. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you. Do I have any questions? One thing I wanted to ask Lee about, a couple of years ago, we've got a lot of new members coming in, 30, I think, in the House. And you gave us a report for each county that we represent about how much they exported and imported, and it was very good information. And I wondered if y'all could do that again for the representatives.
We're updating our data for the fiscal year, and so as soon as we have that, we'll do that.
And put and I know y'all put it on your website, but if some of us, if you could put it in your hand, we like look at it a little better.
We'll print it out for each member on their the county in which they represent.
And it was really some great information, and we could go home and brag on y'all with it when we had to talk to the Rotary Club and everything. So we do appreciate y'all doing that for us. I don't know if do you remember getting that? You do? Well, you need to look at But it's been a couple of years. It's been 4 or 5 years ago.
It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, but it would be good for all the new members to know what's happening in their district. Okay, Representative P.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bart, it's a good presentation. Appreciate it. I got a question about the inland container ports.
Yep.
They were kind of all the rage a couple of years ago in anticipation for this, but have y'all done any analysis of whether those things have been an economic benefit for the local communities that have gone? Because I'm hearing mixed signals about that.
Sure.
So,
yeah, it's a very good question, and you could slice it up in a number of different ways. The first thing I'll say is about a year and a half. So it was probably last July, August of 2015 when we announced Murray County, and the Speaker, the Governor was there, and CSX Rail. And so we announced that, and probably about, I'd say 6 or 8 months later, there was some economic development announcements in Murray County that specifically said we are going to move here because of
the
this
inland
port.
Okay.
Now, I mean, it was probably 100 jobs, but in Murray County that's a good lick.
How about Cordele? Have you-
Cordele. And so let me kind of step back for a second. The inland ports run the spectrum. So like on Murray County, we're building it. And so it's a partnership, us, CSX, and the state, out of some dollars from the state. Cordele, they own it, and we signed an agreement with them to help kind of market them and to help them. They've been great partners. Like I said, with Kia, they've just made that announcement this summer. And so I think they have a couple of prospects. I don't want to speak, for them on the economic development side of things. But we haven't done, answer your question directly, we haven't done any analysis on, okay, does Cordele make sense? And a lot of it, too, is defense, where we might do something in Northeast Georgia to kind of, we have a lot of people going up to Greenville and then on an inland port there and shipping it down to Charleston. So if we do something when our return is something you might not do in your business, might be a little bit different.
Yeah.
But for us, it means retaining business that we currently have, and we might get a smaller percentage on our return. It might take a couple more years too.
Well, so,
Go ahead.
So are you actively looking for partners? I mean, or are you having counties and communities come to you and go, hey, we want to do this?
Yeah.
And, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Both. So you
Yeah,
you are actively seeking them as well as having folks come.
We
to you?
have we have they're popular, and so we have a lot of counties and a lot of communities who come by and visit. The development authorities will bring their chairs and they'll and we'll talk to them, and we'll be honest with them because. It takes a lot because you have to stop the train. You got to have the traffic. What's your manufacturing base? Where's this product coming from? And we'll have a good conversation with them and say, you know what, in this area, you might want to think about this instead of having that.
Well, that's kind of the point. The question I was getting to is what is the best model? I mean, have you figured out? I mean, I'm hearing the model that in Cordele it hadn't been the big boom, but it was them initiating and owning it. And is it maybe a better scenario where the state actually owns it and manages it? Is that a fair question?
It's a fair question, and it's so let's say in Murray County, it's basically state with some CSX dollars, right? And so that one makes perfect sense for us to do because it allows us to get into the manufacturing market up into the Tennessee Valley. It allows us access, and so when you think outside of Georgia, well, that's great, Tennessee Valley, Ohio, but that means logistics jobs in Georgia, and that means another maybe a widget manufacturing facility in Georgia too. And so if we can reach into there, that might make sense, but somewhere else in the state, it might not make sense. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to go to a developer, a commercial developer, and say, like I said, the one in Murray County is about $25 million. And so it's, all right, commercial developer, you want to build out some warehouse space around there. And then why don't you put the capital in of, let's say, 15. We'll make these numbers up. $15 million. And then you can, that's your play on the real estate side outside. So it's really the spectrum. And depends on geography. It depends on what's coming through, what the economic development. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a let's build it and they will come.
Right.
Because the railroad folks are our partners, but rightfully like we're not going to stop a train, for 10 cars. But we'll do it for maybe a couple, for $5,000 a year, $7,000, something like that. Yeah. But we can help guide those communities. So if they have questions, they can come talk to Lee and me. We'll get the folks who actually know what they're doing and sit down and say, hey, this is what we see in your community. This might be a better fit instead of having the banner drop, balloon drop. This is the inland port. Maybe it's another yard.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it, Bart.
One quick question when he said about the Savannah port. A lot of these pecans are shipped out of Cordele that we send to China, aren't we?
Yeah, it's a good market. I've gone on some trade missions with some folks who are involved in that as well.
I know a lot of people are selling lots of pecans to China and overseas right now.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. It's
Are we shipping any olive oil yet?
I don't know.
Exporting any olive oil? Just trying to get more of our locals to use it.
There might be a tax on 1 and 2 of those bottles coming through if we're handling.
too good to send it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the job we're doing. Are there any other
Thank you, ma'am.
questions? Thank you.
Thanks for your time today.
Let's see. Oh, well, what did I skip? Okay, wait a minute. World Congress Center. Frank Poe.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you. And everybody knows Lindsay Strickland, and congratulations on y'all winning the election.
Thank you.
In your packet should be a presentation that we'll walk you through
Good.
as part of our remarks. It's a copy that has a covering heading that says Georgia World Congress Center Authority. We have that in front of you?
Wait a minute.
Yep.
On the right. Okay. I've got
All
you.
right.
I was looking at all the other fun stuff.
All right. Well, Madam Chair, thanks very much for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon, and appreciate again your recognition of Lindsay. She does a tremendous job on our behalf during the General Assembly, and we're always pleased and excited to be in front of this particular committee and give you an update on what we're doing, and in particular talk more specifically today about a significant capital project that we're going to be would be advancing for your further consideration. But before I do that, let me just give you a couple of updates in regards to our last fiscal year. If you'll turn to page 2, we'll give you a snapshot of what we've done this past fiscal year. Congress Center had $1.5 billion in economic impact through the fiscal year, with sustained jobs, a little over 15,000 that support the industry and the convention trade show industry in the state of Georgia, and more specifically Atlanta. We had a return to the state in sales tax of $87 million off the business that we generated through this last fiscal year. And in the context of visitors to our campus, just under 3 million visitors frequented either the Georgia Dome, the Congress Center, or Centennial Olympic Park in FY16. So had a very, very good year last year. Much as the ports, we don't seek operating support from the General Assembly. We're a self-sustaining operation, and from our operations we are also able to contribute from our own resources back into the capital side of what we need within the Congress Center. Not at the order of magnitude of some of the items that you've supported us on in the past, but we will self-generate between $3 to $5 million a year that we're able to put back into the Congress Center out of the event revenues that we drive through the facility. I want to talk to you just real quickly about Centennial Olympic Park, which would be the next slide behind the FY16 in review. You may recall over the course of the last 2 sessions, the General Assembly supported us with $5 million to go into Centennial Olympic Park. Those funds were actually leveraged to help us with the private sector secure in excess of $22 million in private sector dollars that will go into the park. So a total of $27 million over the next 2 years will be reinvested back into Centennial Olympic Park, the most amongst 6 major projects. One involving the Metro Chamber building. We acquired that building this past March. It'll be demolished first quarter of this year, and the park will be expanded into that footprint so that we really clearly create a very much an open window back towards the front door of the Congress Center off of Marietta Street. So we're very, very excited about that project getting underway. The slide that you see there is actually opposite. If you were doing a diagonal across the park from the Metro Chamber, we'll be extending and opening up that corner of Baker Street and Centennial Olympic Park Boulevard with the extension of the water feature, so that it really creates another major portal into the park from that location. And then there's updates to the amphitheater that's in the park. Our operations office building will be torn down and relocated within the park itself. And then the International Boulevard, which we closed down a couple of years ago, will create a pedestrian mall through that area, so that it'll be one contiguous park without a separation of a roadway that you might see there, and if you were to come to the park today. So very excited about this. These projects will be done over the course of calendar 17 and 18. Our goal is to have all the projects completed before Super Bowl 2019, which will be in the Mercedes-Benz facility at that point. If you look at the other great investment of the state of Georgia, we think the Georgia World Congress Center Authority is similar to the ports, is another great investment. The state has invested over $630 million in bond funds for the Georgia World Congress Center. Over the course of its life, it's returned back to the state, or generated for the state, $1.4 billion in sales tax revenue. So realizing, if you just did the simple pure math, a net profit to the state of $770 million over its life over the life of the Congress Center Authority up to this point. So we think it's another solid investment, one in which we're very proud of, and one that we continue to work at and improve on in terms of the types of businesses that we go for and bring into the state of Georgia to support our operations. So the primary point that I wanted to talk to you about today is a major capital project that we will be part of your consideration in this current session. It's a $55 million project that basically will allow us to stitch together our Buildings B and Building C, two major convention facilities that will allow us to create contiguously 1.1 million square feet of exhibit space. And you may ask, well, why is that important? It's important for a number of reasons, and I've got a slide that'll touch on that. But let me just say from the outset that this is important in terms of not only existing business, but also future business that have indicated a strong desire to come to the state of Georgia if we were able to stitch together those two halls. So this project was about 100,000 square feet of exhibit space. Inclusive, it will have an additional 45,000 square feet of meeting space, lobby space, et cetera. So it's a very sizable project, but for us it's a game changer in terms of how our business model and how we are able to continue to market and sell the facilities. The next slide gives you a depiction of what conceptually the project would look like if it were operational today. Again, with exhibit space that would bind the two main halls of the Congress Center into one larger hall that also allows to segment it in the event that there are other types of uses that we would want to involve in that space. If you go to the next slide, slide 7, it's all about connectivity, and it enhances our connectivity across the campus. Our chief competitors, Chicago, Orlando, and Las Vegas, all have the capability of providing singular 1 million to 1.2 million square feet of exhibit space. We took our board and members of the legislature to Chicago and Anaheim. In fact, they have a contingent now in New Orleans today, looking at what 1.1 million square feet of contiguous exhibit space can do for not only the community and the state, but how it really allows us to move and penetrate into a much larger market. So these types of connectivities and components are really critically important to us. Two of our major trade shows that are actually housed here in Georgia, Poultry and Egg, the International Poultry and Egg Convention, International Woodworking Fair, which are both in the Georgia World Congress Center, but also headquartered in the state of Georgia, need this space as well in order to allow their shows to continue to expand, to grow, so that we don't lose them off to other communities. And these two meetings that are critically important. And in fact, if you go back to some of the things in some of Bart's presentation, the top two export items coming out of the state of Georgia, wood products, food. Poultry and egg is a big part of that, and that industry in Georgia is a big part of that. The wood products that come out of the state of Georgia as exports through the Georgia Ports Authority are also two major trade shows that are housed here in the Georgia World Congress Center. and in the state of Georgia. The next slide, slide 8, gives you a sort of a sampling of the types of groups that are currently using, currently not using the facility, but have committed to use the Congress Center contingent upon the exhibit hall connected piece. Shows that rotate through, that may be in a position to not return to the state. And then again, the two that I've mentioned, International Woodworking Association and International Production and Processing, which is the Poultry and Egg Convention, are critically important to us. This connector project, we believe, has the potential, strong belief, of creating over $600 million in economic impact to the state of Georgia. So if you consider the investment of $55 million and the return off that investment in excess of $632 million of economic activity in the state, we again believe it's a wise investment and one that would pay for itself in time. As I mentioned, the two major trade shows, International Production and Processing Expo, since it's been in the last 10 years of economic impact off of just that one show, meeting is $562 million to the state. And the woodworking fair, again, a little over $650 million in economic impact over the 32 years of its from 2000 to 2016. So again, reinforcing our commitment to those major players, but also giving us the opportunity to expand our marketplace with the other meetings and conventions, some of which we mentioned on the previous slide. When you consider a look ahead, just a couple of things on the horizon. We have we just finished with the Georgia Dome, the semifinal for the college football championship, very successful event. Alabama and Washington playing there this past Saturday. So we follow that on this next year with the college football championship, which will be on our campus. Obviously play in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but we'll use the Georgia World Congress Center and portions of Centennial Olympic Park as a platform for their events. Super Bowl in 2019, again reflective of the projected economic impact for that. Again, it will use the total campus, Centennial Park, the Centennial Olympic Park, the Congress Center, as well as Mercedes-Benz. The Final Four in 2020. We believe that again we know that will use the entire campus. Two of those events will be on future rotations with us. We believe the College Football National Championship will be on a rotation with the authority, as well as the NCAA Men's Final Four. So two major events that will come back into the city in future years. Lastly, I want to mention that we just recently inked a deal with the Southeastern Conference where they'll remain in the city of Atlanta, the state of Georgia, for the next 10 years. Again, using our campus and Mercedes-Benz as their headquarters, if you will. Very excited about that. They've been with us since 1999 and have committed for another 10 years with another 5-year option to extend beyond that. So, again, another major economic impact driver for our authority and for the state of Georgia. So, that's our story.
That sounds great. I know I've probably got some questions.
Surely.
Do I have any questions? Alan, Representative Peake, I'm sure you have one. Okay, I'm teasing you.
What's the exact date you're planning on tearing down and closing down the dome?
The exact date, we actually will close the dome at the end of March this year, turn the keys over at that point. We'll go finish up our salvage operation. We'll be able to pull about $2.5 million of equipment out of the dome and use it on the Congress Center campus. We'll turn the keys over to the construction company. Demolition is planned for, we believe, I'll know for sure Friday, but we believe it's mid-July. Demolition will occur, and then construction on the former Georgia Dome site to prepare it for parking and some other activation will commence shortly thereafter.
Okay. If I can ask one more question.
Yeah, please do.
You know, we've been looking at casino gambling here in the state. You know, that's a hot topic going to be next year. How much You're losing business to Las Vegas just because they have casino. So the question I'm kind of get to is, if we had casinos here in Atlanta, would that be an additional tool for you in drawing shows here, or is it just kind of curious?
Surely. My answer to the question is that when you consider that there are 3 or 4 things that hit the top of the list when they're making a site selection. It's the facilities. Do you have the sufficient convention trade show space to make our event work? Hotels. You have the number of requisite hotels and proximity to the convention center. Accessibility. What's your airlift, inbound and outbound into the community? Entertainment would be on that list. Wouldn't necessarily say
Would
it's
be fourth.
but it would be in that mix of things. So Atlanta and the state have a great many assets that they can utilize today, and we do. College Football Hall of Fame, the Aquarium, World of Coke, National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Hotel package is very tight. So
casino
it's
would
not-
be,
it's
gambling
not
would be just another extra,
you-
but not
it's-
a determining factor.
You
for
answered that
Correct.
like a true
He
politician.
did. You did good.
learn
You
to
did
dance a
very
little bit.
good. That was excellent. Excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Frank, for the presentation. I just noticed on one of the slides here, I understand that the main need is the connection of buildings B and C, but there's also a mention here about a future convention
Yeah,
hotel.
I
Right.
saw that.
So I know that I've had several trips to Atlanta during the off session when there were no hotel rooms available in the city of Atlanta. And
Right.
so it sounds to me like, and I know that Chicago, with their McCormick and their authority, that they own a lot of hotel rooms
Correct.
that are adjacent to the McCormick Center, several thousand actually. But so what are the plans there? Because it does seem like there's a need there, and from what I could tell from them, that it does seem to be a really good revenue generator.
It is. We are working with the developer. Actually, we just inked up a memorandum of understanding with them regarding a hotel development on our campus, 800-room property. Those types of projects are, from the private sector perspective, are heavy lifts to make, because their time horizon on internal rate of return can be different from someone that is looking on a longer horizon. But we're going to chase that down with the developer to see if we can get to a point that a financial deal that makes sense can work. We've had a number of visits with our board to look at projects in other cities that are state authorities, Chicago being one more recent one. And then, as I said, they're in New Orleans today, both state authorities, in which they took the position of actual ownership of those properties because of the income generation capabilities off the hotels. And in Chicago, they actually will own 2. The Hyatt Regency that exists today and is connected into McCormick Place is a property owned by the state authority, Metropolitan Pier Authority, and their net income generation off that hotel is in excess of $20 million a year. So it's a significant revenue generator. Our board wants to make sure that this is a project that the private sector can't get to or without some significant financial support. If we're not able to get there, I think there is a case that can be made that ownership of a hotel on the campus can be a very profitable venture for the authority to advance. But we've got a few more steps before we get to that point.
It just seems like the proximity of the hotel to your existing infrastructure, whether it be the Mercedes-Benz Stadium or the
Right.
Congress Center, just being able to stay right there and walk
Right.
from place to place would just add a lot of value to the existing
No doubt. It's
investments we've already made.
it would be the exhibit hall component is very important to us. It drives additional business. The hotel, we know that there is sufficient capacity in the market for another 800 rooms to be built there. And because we can deliver the book of business, if you will, you almost secure your own future by knowing that if you were to take an ownership position in the hotel, then you know that the security of that investment long term is going to be very solid.
Yeah.
But it's a piece that we if you look at this in steps, the exhibit hall and the hotel almost move in tandem, but the exhibit hall components needs to come first, and then we can drive that other part of the project with the hotel. And that our time horizon on that is really pretty short. We're trying to get to a point that we're either going to get a deal done or we're not, and that's within the next 3 to 4 months max.
Well, and I would think too, if I was an exhibitor, it'd be great to just stay right there at the convention. I mean, just not have to get in the cab and go somewhere.
Absolutely, it would be a tremendous asset for the
It really
campus
would,
and for the
for
business.
me deciding whether I wanted to have an exhibit there.
Right.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Thank you so much, and thank you for the job you're doing.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
The Georgia Agro Expedition Authority.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Shimp. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia National Fairgrounds and Agri Center, which falls under the Agricultural Exposition Authority. With me, I have Steve Rogers. He's our CFO. I know Bart said that he's not an accountant, but I always have one that's close by, so that just in case. I have Richard Scuderi as our COO, Operations Officer, and this is, if y'all have any questions for us, we got people here, and Mr. Foster Rhodes is the Vice Chairman of the Exposition Authority. So first off, I want to thank you all very much for having us here today. We are, you put some pretty heavy hitters in front of us, but
y'all doing a great job. I'm not, listen, y'all had me down to eat lunch and see. I know y'all can hold your own. I'm not worried about that.
Well, we do our best. You know, first, we have a story to tell, and it's about children in the state of Georgia. Our investment in our youth, our investment in agriculture, agribusiness. We're here to promote youth in both of them, agriculture, and hopefully push them into agribusiness. And that's the main focus and why we were put there by the state of Georgia. And in doing that, the state of Georgia has invested not only in the economy in the state of Georgia, but they've invested in the future of agriculture, the agribusiness. And I've got to use two examples. We have two recent employees who we've hired who basically grew up in our barns, showing cattle with us. And the adults that they've grown into, we couldn't help but hire them because they grew up here. I know one gentleman here shows a couple of goats with us every year, and his children are into it, you know, so it's but we've got a great story to tell, and we're young, and we want to keep telling that story. Right now, the state of Georgia,
let me add this, you've had an economic impact on that section of Georgia, too.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. I've got a handout that I can give you all. We didn't. We have it calculated through the state of Georgia, about $80 million on the state of Georgia. Now, a lot of that is into central Georgia in our area, but across the state of Georgia, we do approximately 1 million visitors a year. 500,000 of those, of course, we do during our Georgia National Fair, which has an impact on that area like you can't believe. They were talking about hotel rooms. You can't find a hotel room during the Georgia National Fair all the way up to Macon, Georgia, Warner Robins, all the way down into no matter where you go. And some of our other shows do that for that area too. And we've come to you this for fiscal year 18. We're looking to add an additional multi-purpose arena because we want to do more in the area of the economy, and we want to do more for our youth, and we want to get on the level to where we are attracting, we can compete against states like Texas, Oklahoma, the Midwestern states with the large cattle shows that we want them to come to the state of Georgia and see what we're all about. One of the biggest attractions that we have, Perry, Georgia is small town Georgia. We're not Atlanta. People get to Perry, Georgia, And there we draw people from all over the country, all over the world, really, for some of our shows. And they get there and they are just astounded at the state of Georgia, small town Georgia, and they fall in love with it. So we're grateful for the investment that y'all give us. You give us about, I think it's 966,000. We're going by 2015 numbers a year, and that helps us get through our operating times. But in return, I think we're giving you back a pretty good return on the investment. So we're going to save you all some time. We love questions, but we're here, and what we're asking for is about $8.7 million. It finishes our footprint at the fairgrounds, and we can put ourselves on the same level, offer the same facilities as they do across the country for equine events in the cattle industry. And that's what we're about. We want to stay there. So,
Well, it's my understanding that y'all have no more space for any more equine events on the weekends unless we do something.
yes, ma'am. We're out of dates. We're a pretty popular facility throughout the country. Our biggest show, the NBHA, is the National Barrel Horse Association. We draw folks from Canada. We draw them from all over the world. And there are other shows that would like to come like that, but we can't house them. We don't have the dates for them. With this extra facility, what it would do is it would allow us to be turning over the other arena and have an event going on in this arena while we're getting the other one ready for another event to come in. It opens up our calendar.
Well, does anybody else have anything else?
Steve, would y'all like to hear the financials
Yeah,
from the fair?
Right, from the
Our
fair. I'd like to hear the
numbers?
financials from the fair.
We'll let
I think this year's fair was one of the biggest, wasn't it?
536,000 people came through our gates.
We appreciate it. No, the fair, when you look at our budget, the fair generates just a shade over 60% of the revenues we raise during the year. We're 91%, as of the last 2 fiscal years, operationally self-sufficient. The money we get from the state is used for payroll and some things like that. Stephen talked about our expansion hopes and needs. Particularly in the equine area, our equine business has grown substantially. It now represents approximately 13% of our total revenues. We don't see that revenue stream being able to grow a whole lot unless we got more square footage to put it in. So that's what we're hopeful for. The fair, as Stephen said, 536,000 folks over 11 days. New revenue record by a little bit, but the number of people there was astronomical. If you tried to go the second Saturday, you were stopped on the interstate, probably back to Representative Peake's house. I don't know.
We're hoping they went over Cheddar.
I'm sure you were. But when we got done with the fair, one of the things I always try to look at is what kind of sales tax revenue is generated out of the folks that we actually monitor, which is what we sell, what our ride provider sells, and what our food vendors sell. Our state appropriation, as Stephen pointed out, is a little under $1 million. In that 11 days, we earn back almost half of it for the state. It goes back in sales tax revenue that's remitted to the state in that short period of time. I can answer any other questions you'd like.
I remember a couple of years ago, somebody came and testified that one of y'all's big expenses was the insurance y'all had to pay for a rain insurance for if the fair got rained out.
To my knowledge,
Do
we
you
don't.
remember that?
I have talked to rain
Yeah.
insurance people. It's too.
It's gone up.
No,
It's gone up too
weren't we
high.
told
It's gone
that?
up too high.
Wasn't it testified here? That was y'all's. I'm not saying you testified, but somebody can. They.
You know,
When?
it has been discussed numerous times, and at one of the conventions we attended, I sat in on some sessions, and the guy talked about it. And when he started talking about the cost, I thought,
But they were telling us that was one of y'all's biggest expenses that y'all did with state money was to buy insurance.
that has not been my experience in the last couple of years.
Well, this was like,
Yeah, we've not done that. No.
how many years ago was that, Tracy?
I think 3.
3 or 4? Maybe not. I remember it
2 or
was.
3. It was
No,
2.
what? I think it was longer than
Oh,
that.
what may have
It was
been
when I
the
first took
term.
over. The first
2
term I
terms.
took
Yes,
over.
ma'am.
It was the very first term I took over this.
Well, I can provide you the number of economic breakdowns. The thing that has always when we get to the end of the fiscal year, I always do a pie chart for the board.
Uh-huh.
And it shows where the revenues come from, and when you see the piece that is the fair and that is the equine, that's 3/4 of the money we,
Yeah.
take in.
Well, no, I was talking about the
Oh,
expenses.
the expenses.
Expenses. I think this was
Payrolls are big.
this was about 5 years ago.
To my knowledge, we've not ever bought rain insurance, at least that's what I was told.
All right, I don't.
Foster's been here longer than any of
Yeah.
us.
Okay.
I think it was too expensive for us to buy. It's quite
Yeah.
inexpensive.
I don't think it was y'all that
No.
that told us that, but somebody from y'all's
Right.
I just filed that away. But I think y'all doing a great job, and do y'all want us to go over these? Let's see. Okay, and let's look at these. Let me give everybody a minute to look at these figures.
Yeah, that's-
Oh, and it doesn't include the $5 hotel tax.
Well, man, we don't know how to track that.
Okay.
We've been trying, but I
Yeah, and well, this is just amazing. It
Well, the other
really
thing
is.
that our mission, as Steve was talking about, with youth, is the contribution and reduced rates we provide to FFA and 4-H, because that is really, what we're about, is trying to make sure young people have a place to show and
what we provide to them is a safe and clean environment, and that is our number one goal when the youth come in there. And we do it at a very reduced rate, if not for nothing for them. So it's they fit our mission. We feel like that's what we were put there for. And we work everything else around it trying to support that financially. And that's why we go after these big equine events. We go after big dog shows we may have. But we need those so that we can financially get behind 4-H and FFA. And it assists us in our mission of what we're trying to do.
It seems like y'all doing I don't know how much more y'all could do unless you have some more space.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
I do know that I have talked with the Commissioner of Agriculture about the One Georgia thing, Grow Georgia.
Yes,
And it's
ma'am.
going to be something completely different. And,
Right, right.
And that will not be coming, y'all not going to be competing with them.
Right.
And he doesn't want to give anything
Well,
that y'all are going to be competing for the same money. And
They
he's
are-
really made that
They've got a
clear.
great program that fits into our fair also,
Uh-huh.
the Georgia Grown program, which is come on strong, and we thoroughly support that too.
Yeah.
So.
Sam, Representative Watson.
I just wanted to comment on what you just said about the youth. I had two little ones that were there for 2 days, and I was there, and I've never seen a place that was that clean, that had that many people there every day. And I don't know many places where I'd let a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old run wild without my supervision. But we did there at the fairgrounds.
That's
and
right.
appreciate what y'all were doing. And I've also heard a lot of great comments about, I know you got a lot of new staff on, and heard a lot of great comments about things going with livestock shows and everything that's going on there. So appreciate what y'all were doing.
Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all for letting this back family come back.
And I tell you what, another thing that just really impressed me is for y'all to have the same people doing the rides at the fair for how many years?
It's been since
I mean-
our inception.
since the
Sa-
beginning.
Have the same company, because you hear so much about, I don't want to say carnival, that's not the word,
Well, we've taken the carnival out of them.
right, you've taken the,
They are now.
they're professionals.
They're
They're
now
not-
a family-friendly operation.
operation, it's
Yes,
a
ma'am.
family-friendly operation and not,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
and you read so much about some of the rides aren't safe in some places, and y'all really have made sure that things were up to date, and I do
Yes, ma'am.
appreciate that. Representative P.
I just want to echo again, guys, thank you again for the great job you're doing. You're a shining star for the middle Georgia area, so job well done. I do want to ask you about the Go Fish.
Sure.
That's good. That's it. That's not them.
Well, I was going to ask, are y'all
No,
administering
no,
that, or y'all managing
DNR.
No,
that?
sir. We have nothing to do with
Nothing
it.
to-
To my knowledge, all we did was give them the land to put it on.
Okay, I just was curious. whether it's
DNR.
self-sustaining.
No.
No
Well, and
comment.
did y'all have any people go see Go Fish while they were there at the fair? Did y'all have?
There's a limited amount
shuttles,
that
or was
some
it-
goes. They've tried the shuttles. It's we like to say our fair is so great they never want to leave the gate, and that's true to some point. They don't want to go back outside the gate to see something else. They're in the fair. They're going to be in the fair. So.
Yeah, actually, my family did go. We went and had never been before,
Uh-huh.
and there was not a lot of folks there that go fish during the week of at least the time that we were there. So
Beautiful
I'm not sure it picks up a lot of traffic.
Right.
It didn't seem like it did at the time.
I will say they do a lot of field trips during the week and things like that.
That's under Representative Carter's budget. I think she's working with them. You might want to ask her about it. Does anybody else want to say anything? And I appreciate y'all coming and
We just made sure we had it stacked so that any question that you had, we'd give you the right
you
answer.
got everybody.
That's
And
right.
Decent representation down there.
And I'm gonna tell you, I can't tell you. I am sorry I was late getting there, but Shaw Blackman almost ran me crazy every time wanting to know when I was coming to pier.
We thank you for your visit.
I enjoyed it. Had a great time.
And that visit is open to any of y'all,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
We love to tell our story. We love to show it off. It's a beautiful facility. Non-fair time, fair time, there's always something going on there. Please come visit us.
And appreciate what y'all do.
Thank y'all very much.
That was you did great. You didn't have to come behind the big voice. You did great.
Thank you.
Y'all are the big boys. All right, we're running ahead. We're a little ahead of schedule. Let's see. Georgia Soil and Water. Are y'all ready, or do y'all?
Yes, ma'am, I'm ready. Y'all want to wait for?
No, we've just got.
You want me to go ahead? That's
Let's go. Y'all ready to go ahead? I don't know how many of y'all have had an opportunity to meet our new commissioner over at Soil and Water, but we have Mitch Attaway here and he's the new commissioner at Soil and Water. And we have Ms. Karen Parson, who is the chief budget analyst. I don't know, is that you have many hats. After talking to you, I don't think I can describe all the hats you have here. Before we get started, I just want to take a few minutes to tell y'all about a good friend that has just passed away, who was very, very dear to Soil and Water and to the water movement in South Georgia. I don't know how many of you know Hal Haddock, but Hal died this morning, and he will really be missed. And if you get a chance, I'm sure that Alice and his family would enjoy hearing from y'all, because he was a great Georgian and a great friend to Soil and Water, and we will miss him. I just wanted to say that, and thank you. Now I don't think you're called commissioner. Are you commissioner?
Director.
Director. Thank you. Okay.
But I'll answer to whatever you'd like to call it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. And we were here earlier this morning. I believe y'all are running behind and were more interested in FY17. So I took some time over lunch and kind of condensed what I was going to present. But looking forward to coming back with FY18.
Okay.
Give a couple of updates first. As you mentioned, the commission has a new executive director. I took over 1st of September. One of the things that we're really interested in is we're starting to coordinate with OPB and the Department of Ag about, since we are administratively attached, about what some of the duties the Department of Ag can help not pick up for us, but help out. Seems like before, in the past, we had a office manager as well as was consulting with an accountant on some of our paperwork, and we're looking at moving some of those into the Department of Ag while we're attached to get some benefits of that.
Well, that's a good
I can't
idea.
speak on the final outcome of that. That's still being worked out with OPB, but we're looking forward to that. Another update that's been going on in the commission is the MOU that was signed that transferred our ag metering program over to EPD. That also took a little over $900,000 for that program with the One Georgia funds to EPD to operate the program. Moving on, the Green Book, or the erosion.
Sediment control.
Yes, ma'am. That was approved by the Overview Council just on 12/19. It stays as is, no changes. So 2016 manual rolls over for 2017. And that is actually my ask right now for FY17 to be amended, is now that this is approved and it looks like it's going to stay current, is this field manual that we have, these pages they're waterproof. I could tear them if I wanted to, but they don't tear that easy. They're kind of great for the guys on the job site to keep in their truck or to have really handy. We would like to print 500 of these to get out to guys on the job site. We're looking at about $26 a piece to print these, so our ask would be an amendment of $13,000 to get these printed. And get the education out there. We're also in our erosion and sediment control training classes. You'll see up on the right-hand corner at the very top that we, in FY16, we did a little over 12,000 people through our certification classes, and that's actually about a 2,400 person jump from the year before. A lot of those came back for recertification or our awareness class, our lowest level class, and we take that as a sign that hopefully construction's picking up and people are entering back into that workforce. An issue that we've ran into that though, that program's been around since 2005, and at that time we had material translated into Spanish. And as you can imagine, over a 11-year time span, things get out of date and need to be updated. And that's where we're at with our Spanish training material. It's 11 years old and is kind of out of date, and we're looking at getting that translated. The quotes that we have right now are upwards of $37,000 to $40,000 to have all of our material translated. I'm hoping that when we come back to discuss budget again, I can tell you that I've found a grant, or I have already reached out to the University of Georgia's Department of Latin Languages about partnering with them to get this translated. I've not got much feedback on them yet, but hopefully, like I said, when we come back, I can tell you that issue's been resolved.
Well, you know, the court system has lots of translators too.
That's something I'll look into.
I don't know if they, have the time. You could probably speak for that, Joe. But the court system is a good source of, so I understand, for translators.
Well, I'll investigate that avenue.
And one other thing too.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I think your printing is great and everything, but our technical colleges have a printing facility at Valdosta at Wiregrass Tech.
Okay.
And I don't know if they, would have water, the waterproof and everything. That's something you might want to check with Dr. Anderson and see if they're interested in doing some.
No, but Dr. Anderson?
Dr.
Yes,
Tina Anderson, she's the president of Wiregrass Tech in Valdosta. And I'm not sure what other technical colleges do that, but they have a printing part of it. Jason, you could probably tell me more about it than I'm.
Yeah, I'm like you though. I think they're doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and I don't know if they can do
they might not.
Need something waterproof makes sense.
Yeah.
May or may not. But it might be something they could do if they could do it.
Okay.
It helps them
Yeah,
too,
it helps them too,
Absolutely.
and it's just a suggestion.
Okay.
Everything I've seen looks really professional.
And another thing too, we had the forestry department here, and we were talking about their program. They have a program for material and trucks and things you need.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you need anything, you might want to check with the forestry department if you're looking for anything like that.
Okay.
They have generators, that sort of stuff that they can get you through the federal surplus program.
Okay.
I'm just trying to point out some things that you might not, since you're new to that.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that.
But do I have? Okay, go ahead. I won't.
Okay, the last thing that I was going to speak on is give an update on where we're at with our watershed dams. That's a big project for us. We're currently working on 8 different dams in various stages of construction or design. Those 8 dams in total will protect over 34 structures, I believe 7 roads, and multiple county and city infrastructure too. One we just finished up in Habersham County. Cornelia, the city of Cornelia's watershed treatment plant was right below. So obviously that would be a major concern if we had a breach with that dam. So we were happy to get that managed and reconstructed for them. And like I said, with that, I kind of condensed my project down to more or less of what we're doing in FY17. Look forward to coming back with FY18 in the future.
So if you will get with Tracy and give us your only request to be on the amended budget, and if you will get with Tracy, and I think the only request you have to amend the amended budget 17 is for the printing of the book. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was like 13,000.
Yeah.
But if you would just get that to her in writing,
Okay.
and you might not have time to do that with the technical school, but I just wanted to point that out, that they do printing.
We'll investigate it, absolutely.
So just Representative Watson.
Touch back on the water metering program.
Yes.
That's all now going to be completely under EPD?
Yes.
And they'll be partnering with Georgia Forestry for
It's my understanding that they plan on continuing that partnership with the forestry department. Our agreement, our reconstructed agreement with the forestry department ran out in December since EPD took it over. But forestry was done reading that at the first of the year anyway. But it's my understanding that EPD wants to continue that relationship.
And I think a lot of this happened during, well, a lot of it happened during the, I don't remember. I forgot what I was going to say.
But, speaking further on that, we also had 7 employees out of our office transferred to EPD. Yes, everybody that was associated with that program went over, and they plan on maintaining that in the Dawson office, the Hooks Hanner Environmental Resource Office.
Well, we appreciate the job you're doing, and any way we can help you. And Karen, maybe we can get something worked out, and you won't have to wear so many hats.
Thank you.
And we will be back to discuss your request in 2018 request.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and you did a great job. This is his first time coming before us. You did a good job.
I've got your contact, I'll send you your contact on that while I get call.
I appreciate that.
We're just moving right along. Okay, we might be okay, let's see. I don't think I don't see Chris Tillerson here yet. We're 30 minutes ahead of time. I guess we can take a little break. And Elma Stansel, I don't think they come till, am I not right? Yeah, they come on at 3. I don't see them. Is Jeeper here? Oh, well, good. We'll just skip down to you.
I was really hoping to close out today.
Okay, well, come on. I'm glad you spoke up, because we'll get out here early. We'll get out here early.
Oh, I've got 85 slides here.
Oh, and the screen doesn't work.
Well, it's going to take a lot longer than.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Chief.
I know, but it's Christian.
Thomason that has it
I
coming.
know, I'm talking about right there. Which one is? we're so glad to have you here, Mr. Director Clark. I think that's the.
Oh, I'm like
anything.
I'm like Mitch. I'll
And
answer to
Chris
anything.
Jones, the Deputy Director, thank you for coming.
And Jamie Harden.
Jamie Harden.
Our chief, our director of finance. So
Yeah,
appreciate the
he's the
opportunity.
man in charge of the money.
He's an important guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And everybody has had a handout. Did you get a handout? Okay. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having us here, and thanks for letting us go early. I appreciate it.
I thank you for speaking up.
We'll see how, no good deed goes unpunished. But
What is that?
you guys may recall years ago, Commissioner Beatty, when he was at Community Affairs, used to use his football analogies to describe the roles of various agencies when it came to economic development. And he would say that Department of Economic Development is the quarterback and Community Affairs was the fullback. So I just naturally assumed that at some point GIFA became the water boy. So that's kind of our role in the economic development arena. But I do want to spend just a few moments, if I could, talking about a couple of our operational divisions before we get into the budget requests. Wanted to first talk about our Energy Resources division. They have 4 primary areas of focus. That's energy efficiency, renewable energy, energy assurance, and managing the state fuel storage tanks. With energy efficiency, we manage 2 real programs there, the Low Income Weatherization Assistance Program, which is federally funded, and then we also manage the federally funded State Energy Program that provides funding for technical assistance to communities and also funding for projects that reduce energy consumption. So both of those programs work at energy efficiency, and that's one of the primary focus areas of our Energy Resources group.
Do you have any numbers on your when you go in and redo houses, the number of houses? How much does it cost you to do a house?
We have, under the 2 programs, we have a limit right now. I think it's $6,800 per home we can spend. And it usually varies somewhere into $6,500 to $6,800 is the maximum we can spend.
When you contract with different agencies to do this, what percentage do they get for administering this money?
It's a little confusing in that there's a 5% administration budget that they get to use, but they also can bill for some of their time of their personnel who are doing actual work under the program materials and support. So they have
that doesn't come out of the 6,800 that
No.
they get.
No.
That's on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do they do with the 6,800?
That goes into the home. So
Now that goes into the material.
Right, into the materials and the labor to put that in. A lot of it's subcontracted.
Well, I didn't follow that. I thought they would build.
Well, some agencies have their own staff, their own folks that do the work, and then others subcontract out.
Okay, well, if their own staff does the work, does the staff get paid out of that 6,800?
They do. They do.
So they don't bill you extra.
No, but if they have personnel who are doing work, let's say that are managing the program, they can charge that in addition to the 6,800.
Well, what are they doing with the 5%?
That handles their office overhead, so it may well be their share of office rent, their office supplies, all those types of office overhead. And some of these agencies, this program for the Department of Energy is about $2.5 million. So when it breaks down to some of the agencies, they may get as little as $40,000 for their whole area.
Okay.
So when you get the 5% of that, it's not a huge amount. So
no, I was thinking it was more that when federal money went into that.
no, it's a small type program.
We have some homes that really do need to be made energy efficient, and I think that would help them with the power bill. I know in a rural area we have lots of people that really are having trouble, paying for that power bill.
It's there is a waiting list in most of the communities to get in, and the selection process and the criteria of being low income based, and then also how many children are in there,
Yeah.
whether they're senior citizens. There's various criteria like that that's utilized. But it's not I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's not a really heavily funded program.
No.
So it's not one of those that you can really do. There may be 4 or 5 houses in a 3 or 4 county area that can get done within a year.
If you don't mind, can we ask questions as you go along since we got extra time?
Sure, that's no problem.
Representative Fee.
I hope you
since you
asked one, I figured I might fire away too.
We've got a little extra
Does your
time.
agency oversee the solar farms as well too? They're going up all over Georgia?
I'm sorry, the
The solar farms, is that, no,
No,
you don't have anything to do with that?
no. If I knew what it was, I could probably tell. I'm just kidding.
Like, as you go from Columbus, those solar farms.
Right, no, we really don't have anything to
No, I
do
think-
relative to that.
PC didn't vote on it.
No,
PSC, okay.
right.
Thank you.
So that's our energy, our renewable energy side and energy efficiency side. We also work with the Georgia Emergency Management Agency relative to energy assurance. When they activate the State Operations Center, we're the lead agency for ESF, or Emergency Support Function 12, which deals with utilities and fuel. So like we may have a storm this weekend, if they activate the center, we'll be there and we'll be monitoring and following up with the utility providers if there's power outages. Back when we had the hurricane over the fall, we were monitoring and they're monitoring the fuel, trying to make sure there wasn't going to be any real shortage, that type of thing, working with the providers and the retailers and those sorts of things. So that's our energy assurance side of the house. We work strictly or primarily with GEMA in that role. So, and then of course we also maintain all of the state-owned fuel storage tanks. So each agency that has underground fuel storage tanks or above-ground fuel storage tanks, we maintain those for those agencies.
We're getting back to the getting ready for storms. Are you planning on one this weekend?
They're talking about having a little one this weekend, so we'll see. Anytime we hear about it, we get all antsy.
Thank you.
Our next division is our Water Resources Division, and that's where we primarily provide financing, low-interest loans for water and sewer work and landfill work, and also for land conservation projects. Since GFA's inception, we've loaned about $3.7 billion for 1,600 projects throughout the state. And we do that through 4 main programs. We have 2 state-funded programs, and we also have 2 federally funded programs. The state-funded programs are the Georgia Fund, which is our program where we do water, sewer, and landfill work. And that's really our tool for being utilized by communities when they have economic development projects. So we can provide funding for those type projects because a lot of times the water and sewer needs are some of the last things that come up in the economic development projects. So we utilize the Georgia Fund to provide financing for those needs. And it's also our source for emergency funding. If a community has an emergency, we can then use the Georgia Fund to help them out and help finance whatever they may need. We just recently have had some wells that have gone dry. Folks need some additional wells drilled, and we provide emergency financing for that as well. The other state-funded program is the Georgia Reservoir Fund, and that's really dedicated for water supply projects. And we utilize that for, when we had the governor's water supply program and doing the reservoir loans, we utilized that program for that. It has some flexibility to it, and we can extend the amortization term for a significant period of time because those
How
projects.
many reservoirs are we building right now?
Right now, currently, we have the one in Paulding County that's under construction, Richland Creek, has been permitted, and the only other one that's been permitted is Hard Labor, and it's filling up now. But we provided funding for both of those, a significant amount of funding to get those projects to the finish line. Then we have 2 federally funded programs. We have the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and that program provides loans for drinking water. So helps communities maintain and keep their drinking water programs and infrastructure safe. And provide safe drinking water. And then we also have the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is a fancy way of saying sewer work, but the Clean Water Fund also finances our land conservation activities. So we can use the Clean Water State Revolving Fund for non-point source pollution control, and we help communities essentially buy green space and also help conserve property for the communities so that they're able to provide non-point source pollution control and also have some green space for their citizens. So we're able to provide some low-interest financing for that. The next slide you'll see shows graphically the impact or the size of our programs over the last 5 fiscal years, or really from, FY12 through 16. What I want to do is just summarize FY 15 and 16 for you briefly. Over those 2 years, we've saved local governments who've utilized our financing over $112 million as opposed to conventional or AA rates or single A rates that they could get on the open market. We financed over $89 million in Georgia Fund projects, $187 million in clean water or sewer projects and land conservation projects, and $65 million in drinking water projects over the last 2 years. We've also provided $36 million in reservoir funds at loans. So that's been the impact over the last 2 years that we've been able to award. And you can see graphically, in FY14 we had a couple of large sewer projects that we were able to fund, and that's why we had a little spike there. But we stay around $200 million generally. Our customer base is somewhat limited. We can't expand to South Carolina or anything. But we do stay around that area, about 200 million or a little bit more. And sometimes we get big projects. We've got the City of Atlanta is going to do some significant work, and we'll see a bump when we see those projects and those contracts go through. But we've got plenty of capacity on our federal side, so that's where we drive most of our projects to, is our federally funded programs. And we try to keep the Georgia Fund available for when the economic development projects arise, because they usually happen really quickly when they do come on board, and they usually need a lot of money pretty quickly in flexible terms. So that we try to manage our Georgia Fund program with that in mind. Several years ago, you may recall, when the Baxter project came on over in the eastern part of the city, when we got the call that that was going to happen, we had to provide about almost $20 million in financing pretty quickly to that group, and they had to have flexible terms. And by the way my predecessors had managed the program, we were able to do that and not impact or be in a position where we had to deny communities subsequent to that. We were able to meet all the demand that we had. So we utilize the Georgia Fund for those purposes and for emergencies, and then also for smaller projects as they come along. The next slide just shows you our interest rates and our terms for the various programs. We benchmark our loans off the state AAA rate that GSFIC gets when they sell bonds. And so currently we're at 2.39% is our state funded rate over 20 years. We reduce the federally funded program by 500 basis points, or 0.5%, just because there are some acknowledgments that the federally funded programs do have a few more hoops to jump through. So we try to make it worthwhile from an economic standpoint for communities to consider utilizing that. So you can see on the drinking water state revolving fund under a 20-year loan, that'd be at 1.89% interest rate. Under the clean water state revolving fund, if a community utilized the 30-year amortization, that would be at 2.7%. If they utilized a 20-year AM rate, that would be at 1.89%. And then our state-funded programs are at 2.39%. So even the state-funded program provides the interest rate of a AAA-rated entity, which is about as cheap as money can get from that standpoint. We also have some interest rate concessions. Any projects that qualify as conservation-type projects, whether it's water conservation, energy conservation, or land conservation, receive a 1 percentage point reduction. Communities that are designated as Water First communities by the Department of Community Affairs receive a 1% reduction. And communities that are planned first communities as designated by DCA receive a 0.5% reduction. So we do want to acknowledge those communities who do that type of work, who are great stewards of their resources and are doing conservation projects. We try to encourage those, at least fiscally, from our rate reduction. And then our last page just has really our request. We have no changes for the little budget for the amended 17. And for FY18, our state appropriation request will remain flat. So we'll have the same request for the Georgia Rural Water Association of $423,495. For the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District, $250,000. For the Resource Conservation and Development Districts, $165,000. So that totals to $838,495 for state appropriations. And then under general obligation bonds for 18, we'll be asking for $12 million for the Georgia Fund, $8 million for federal match for our SRF programs, the Clean Water and Drinking Water Program. And then working with DCA, we'll be requesting $10 million for Reservoir State Direct Investment Program. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Will this DCA reservoir bond, will that pull in any federal money?
No, ma'am.
I see up on the GO bonds you had a.
We do
federal-
for the match for the federally funded program. We have the $8 million that we use to match, because that gives us access to about $40 million in funds for the loan programs.
Okay. Thank you, and I think since you don't have, do we need him? I don't think we need him to come back, do we? Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions, Representative Frustration?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, sir, Mr. Clark, for your presentation today. I have received some input from constituents just inquiring about investments made in potential reservoirs or future investments in water resources and availability of that. Could you just comment about maybe how the $10 million in investments would be utilized, or what can be provided, taken home, concerning our future plan for available water resources?
Right. With the $10 million that we're requesting with DCA, that goes under what we call our State Direct Investment Program. And so when we utilize that part of our program, what we're doing is essentially the state is buying an interest in a project. The last part we did from a state direct investment standpoint with Paulding County and their Richland Creek reservoirs, we actually are buying and going to own a chunk of their transmission line, because that will allow them to bring their water down to their most populated part of the county much faster than they had originally anticipated. So it's a long-winded way of saying when we do this, and in anticipation, hopefully at some point we'll be able to buy pieces of existing reservoirs where the state will have some interest in that water. And a lot of it's going to depend on, frankly, what happens with the Supreme Court,
That's one follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm familiar with some local governments working on reservoir projects of their own, and would there be, expecting those maybe to come in the future, would there be some partnership that the state would offer, expecting and anticipating those projects coming?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. We will. Right now, we're somewhat in a holding pattern, really somewhat waiting to see what happens with the case. Now, depending on how that goes out, then we want to be prepared if we need to go out and buy some interest in reservoirs, either existing or whatever is going to be coming down the pike. And as you're well aware, it takes forever and a day to get a project permitted. And that's why there have been really just a few that we've been working on. But we do want to be able to have that flexibility to do that. So yeah, we'd be happy to work with, that's what we do.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, I'm sorry, Representative Watson.
Thank you. And I may have missed it. I just wanted on the Georgia Fund, 5 to 12, what exactly would you be doing with that extra money?
Again, we'd be making low interest loans. Right now, we currently have our maximum for the Georgia Fund at $3 million. I'd like to increase that a little bit. I'm still trying to manage making sure that our federal program doesn't get underutilized. The Georgia Fund program is really popular, and when we have our cap really high, the federal program gets underutilized, and so we end up building up these balances there. But I do want to be able to increase that, and I do anticipate. I think that community economic development's been pretty active, and I'm anticipating we'll get a run on some projects that we'll need to fund. Again, we're usually at the tail end of those discussions, so anticipating we'll get some of that.
That's for community water projects, or like what's up?
No, I mean, again, you can think about the last big one that we really did was Baxter Labs, where we had to provide the $20 million, but that was for pretreatment, water treatment, and expansions for the water authority and for the county. That we had multiple deals going on with that. Yes, sir.
Well, what is the federal match? I mean, what is the federal? You said they used the Georgia fund before the federal. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that the federally funded program, we get a significant amount of funding every year with that to make the loans. And, the federal government, believe it or not, they do track very aggressively our spend rate and our loan rate. And so we never want that to be in jeopardy. So we're constantly making sure that we really only have 2 grant years open at any one time. So that's why we tried to market, if you will, and encourage folks to use the federal program both financially by having the interest rate reductions and being able to extend the amortization period. Does that make any sense?
Thank you, and thank you for the job y'all are doing, and thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything in the. It's not an entry. It's a sign.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we were running a little early, and I hope y'all didn't mind. Y'all are the grand finale. Y'all are going to be the grand finale. We just had a little time, and Mr. Clark stepped up to the plate, and so, and
I'm used to following Kevin a lot. So.
okay.
And Matt's passing out copies of our presentation.
And we've got, I think all of y'all probably, he's putting on 2 hats now. Y'all know Director Tumberson, and we're so glad to have Emma Stansel here. He left us from economic development. He's gone somewhere else, but he took care of us in economic development, and I'm sure he will take care of us there.
Absolutely.
And also, thank you, Matt. Where did Matt go? Oh, I see.
And Mark Peoples is here.
And Mark Peoples is here. Okay, I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean to leave you out.
We can certainly get you some.
Okay, that's what everybody wants to know.
About the tolls?
Uh-huh.
But we do so much more than that.
Yeah, but this is what we. This what's
Well, I definitely plan to talk about it. So, good afternoon.
And I think your CFO's here too.
Yes, Mark Peoples, our CFO, and our budget director, Linda McElroy, is here
Budget
as well.
director. Okay, I've got them all your titles mixed up.
Yeah,
Okay.
We do too.
we wear a lot of hats.
I'm sure there's more than one hat that you wear.
They keep me straight.
It's always good to have you here.
Well, thank you. It's always good to be here. So, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. First of all, let me say Happy New Year, and it's our pleasure to tell you about what's going on with both the State Road and Tollway Authority as well as the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. Taking a look at the slides, if you look at slide 1, I always like to start off by talking about our commuter-facing operations. You're probably familiar with us, so I'll move through it quickly. But when it comes to the express commuter service, we operate 25 routes, and we do what we call long distance or commuter coaching service. So we're running 25 routes
from 30 different park and rides that are spread out amongst 12 out of the 13 county jurisdiction of the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority. But we actually draw ridership from over 40 counties. There are a lot of people who drive into one of the park and ride locations to pick up one of our routes. Our routes travel essentially from the suburbs of Metro Atlanta into the work areas of either downtown, midtown, or the perimeter center location. And in FY16, we had 2 million passenger boardings. It's about 9,000 passenger boardings per day. Unlike a lot of the operators who run local service, we only run Monday through Fridays during the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour periods. On the Peach Pass side of things, we are the people who bring you Peach Pass and operate the I-85 express lanes and used to operate Georgia 400. As we stand here today, there's over 300,000 counts. I believe at last count, there's about 330,000 active Peach Pass accounts. Spread out on those accounts are about 500,000 active Peach Passes. That is not the number that we've issued. Those are the number that are still active, because every single day new ones come on, new ones go off. But over 500,000 vehicles throughout Georgia and actually a few in some other states have active Peach Pass transponders. I-85, which opened in 2011, and at that time in the first month averaged 7,000 daily trips. Today averages over 28,000 trips per weekday. And the Peach Pass, if you do have it, it is fully interoperable on any toll road in Florida and North Carolina, and we are in discussions with several other states so that you can use your Peach Pass accounts there. We're in discussions with South Carolina and Texas. I know there's not a lot of people doing a commute back and forth. I can speak to that a little bit later. But also, of course, in the Northeast, those states that use Easy Pass, we've been in discussions with them as well. So in the future, that Peach Pass account will work in more and more states. A little bit of background on our FY17 budget. So again, both entities are authorities, so the overwhelming majority of the budget is not appropriated dollars. But again, to give you a sense of the size and scope of the operations, State Road and Tollway Authority's FY17 budget was $23.7 million. You'll see from the pie chart about 45% of that went to personnel services. That is a large percentage, and in fact, it's a larger percentage than in years past. Part of the reason for that is on July 1, at the beginning of FY17, we consolidated all staff between SRTA and Greta underneath CERTA. So basically what you have is one consolidated staff as well as leadership team providing the services for both legal entities. And the personnel budget reflects the combined staffing of both. In terms of actual appropriated dollars, what flows through the budget process, you'll see in the lower right hand corner on the bottom of slide 2, we receive appropriated funds through the budget line item that says payments to CERTA. It's a line item that appears in the Department of Transportation's budget. And it really consists primarily of two items. A little under $13 million, to approximately $12.99 million for the Infrastructure Bank program. And that's in the base budget. And I have a slide coming up where I'll give you more details on the Infrastructure Bank. And the rest is debt service payments. If you've had the opportunity to have DOT in front of you, there are several bonds, Garvey bonds, what are called guaranteed revenue bonds, the proceeds of which have been used as part of DOT's highway program, but the debt service is paid by CERTA. So what you see there of approximately $239 million is the debt service amounts that flows through GDOT's budget to us for making debt service on the bond portfolio. At FY17, there was about a little over $900 million in outstanding bond debt. Turning to the next slide, give you an overview of Greta's budget. Greta's budget is $30.7 million in FY17. Of that amount, $12.9 million is appropriated funds. And of the $12.9 million, approximately $9.7 million is the amount that is associated with the Express Transit program. The rest of Greta's funding is a mix of federal grant funds as well as fare box recovery. We average between 20 to 25% fare box recovery in the Express program. In the the overwhelming portion of the pie, approximately 84%, is contractual services. Everything that happens between Greta and CERTA is done on a contractual basis, but the lion's share of that is what we call our operating contract with a company known as Transdev. They're the ones who provide our drivers, who operate the transit service on our behalf. That contract is approximately $14 million a year, plus the cost of fuel. So it represents the lion's share of the contractual services at Greta. Turning to the next slide, and going back to Mark's comment about everyone wearing multiple hats, as well as the integration efforts. Over the past year, we've been focused on, again, trying to provide a combined and efficient staffing model. We're in the process of physically locating all the staff in one location. We have one CFO, obviously one executive director, one deputy executive director, one HR director, et cetera. So as I mentioned, one consolidated staff providing the functions of two authorities.
A question.
Sure.
I noticed on both of them you have real estate rentals. Do y'all have, are your offices combined, or do you have two separate offices?
Presently, we have two separate offices. CERTA's offices are here on Capitol Hill in the Health Building. Greta's offices are in Peachtree Center, actually not too far from GFA's offices. We are consolidating, moving all the staff into the Peachtree Center location. The lion's share.
That's not two Peachtree, is it?
No, it's
Okay.
the Peachtree Center. It's sitting on top of the MARTA station. It's near where the Marriott Marquis Hotel is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the majority of especially on the Greta side, the real estate leases of the 30 park and rides that I mentioned, 10 are owned by the state. 20 are leased facilities. Some are leases with counties. Some are leased parking spaces from churches. Some are leased parking spaces in malls. Sugarloaf Mills, for example, we lease parking spaces there. Springfield Baptist Church in Rockdale County. We typically pay about $10 per month per space for the locations. And it's a function of either our capital program or what's the most convenient location for the routes. And that's why we have a mix of both state facilities as well as leased facilities.
How much space do y'all require for your
For a park and ride?
not parking right for your staff? I mean,
2 floors. Right now, both entities occupy 1 floor worth of space, and so we're combining onto 2 floors. Between both agencies, you're talking about 100 full-time employees.
okay. I just knew the Department of Agriculture is moving out a lot of their space, and there's extra room over there. I was just
We already were in a long-term lease in the facility. We did an amendment and extension, but consolidating the space. And there's a lot of strategic reasons that we located at Peachtree Center. So at Peachtree Center, we are sitting on top of a MARTA station, which is obviously one of our transportation partners. We're directly across the street from the Federal Transit Administration's regional offices. I mean, literally directly across the street from them. And that's who we have to work with for the federal grant funding. We are 2 stops away from GDOT. We are 4 stops away from MARTA, 1 block away from the Beltline. The Atlanta Regional Commission is moving into Peachtree Center, so we'll literally be across the food court from them. On the certicide, whenever we're dealing with toll violations, anyone who has multiple violations, we have to appear in front of OSA, the Office of State Administrative Hearings. They're also located in that facility. So it was a very strategic location for our operations, not to mention literally looking outside the windows, we can see several of our routes in downtown locations as far as where the bus stops are.
Sounds good.
As I was mentioning, two authorities, but one primary goal of trying to address and provide Georgia mobility options. So be they tolls or be they through transit. We're putting more and more emphasis on the outwardly facing brands. Again, we don't want either really members of the General Assembly or the commuting public to have to figure out the alphabet soup of agencies. So we focus on Peach Pass and we focus on Express, and now we focus on the Infrastructure Bank program. And it really doesn't matter, it literally doesn't matter which number they call. We've combined our customer service center. We do have dedicated phone numbers for transit calls versus tolling, but they all come into the same customer service reps who are all cross-trained in both business lines. So everything we're trying to do is integrate solutions and really just trying to streamline and provide multiple options. If you turn to the next slide, in 2016, we underwent major changes to the Express program. We went from 33 different routes to 25 routes, but as you can see from that slide, even though we did that, we were able to add 3 new routes. And what we essentially did was we didn't reduce service, but we increased the frequency on the service, and we combined several routes. So now 18 park and rides have gained more trips. 15 park and rides have higher frequency. It used to be roughly every 30 minutes for a bus. We've increased that to every 15 minutes. We've added new amenities such as putting free Wi-Fi on board. You may hear in the news that MARTA is in the process of still rolling that out. Every single bus on Greta's fleet already has free public Wi-Fi. And we rolled out for the first time the My Express app, but basically GPS location. So even when our buses are stuck in traffic, people can go online or go on an app to at least see where their bus is in traffic and plan accordingly. Turning to the next slide, in terms of some of our major internal initiatives, we started actually last year, but the Greta Express service first started running in 2004. The last time we purchased a new bus was in 2011. And with the exception of a bus that was lost to a fire, actually a mattress got stuck and got caught on fire underneath, the original buses that started this service in 2004 are all still on the road. So we have not replaced any of the buses. So what you see on slide 6 is our fleet reinvestment plan. We're coming up on the end of the useful life of the buses, and it is time to either do a major overhaul and or eventually look at replacing the buses. So what you see on this slide is by model year our schedule for doing a major overhaul, and literally it's exactly as it sounds. If you've ever seen that show Overhauling, these buses are we have a contract, they're sent down to Orlando, they're getting new engines, new transmissions, all the way down to the frame. They're stripped down to the frame. The undercarriages are painted. We do have the advantage of the weather. We don't have salt eating up the chassis and the frames, but these parts needed to be replaced. And the reason we embarked on the reinvestment or the overhauling is the average price of a new coach is anywhere from $680,000 to $750,000. But by doing the overhaul, we can do that for around anywhere from $250,000 to $290,000 and extend the useful life another 4.5 to 6 years. But this is our major initiative to improve the safety and reliability of the existing fleet. Turning to slide 7, and back to, I guess, the first question you had for me, on the toll side. We're working closely with our partners at DOT, and the last week of this month, we will open up the I-75 South Metro Express lanes. So it'll be Georgia's first reversible toll road. It's approximately 12 miles long. It's south of the city. If you've traveled through there, you've dealt with the construction for the better part of 2.5 years. But we are on track and ready to open the last weekend of this month. So we're very excited about that program. A couple of things I'd like to point out. It does use Peach Pass. If you don't have your Peach Pass, please go ahead and get it. But it is new capacity. It's not a conversion like I-85. Also, all vehicles, it's open to passenger vehicles only, so no freight or heavy truck traffic. But all vehicles are subject to the toll. It does not have the occupancy component of I-85. So it's not a hot lane where if you have 3 or more, you can ride for free. So all vehicles pay the toll. The only exception is public transit. And we do have one express route in that area that will be able to utilize it, and we're looking forward to improved speeds and more consistent trip times for those routes. The next slide, slide 8, really, and I apologize for the size of the map, but it really speaks to why I'm wearing 2 hats, and why I jump back and forth between both programs. If you can see it, what you see are a lot of these small blue P's that are shown the location of the 30 park and rides. And the coloration in the corridors show either the existing or future plan managed lanes. And you can quickly see how the two can work together. As we work with DOT to roll out the Major Mobility Investment Program, and which will include adding managed lanes to essentially the entire upper hemisphere or top half of 285 and along Georgia 400, an extension on I-85, and of course the Northwest Corridor toll road up in Cobb, which is scheduled to open in spring of 2018. We already have express transit service in these corridors. We already have park and rides. We are looking at strategically adding some additional park and rides to take advantage of these lanes, but the two go hand in hand, especially with that policy decision that, again, public transit gets to utilize it for free. I guess the big picture is what we're doing with DOT is we're adding additional choices. Unlike I-85, all of these are adding new lanes, so we're not reducing any of the existing choices. People can choose to use these express lanes by paying the tolls, or they can utilize them without paying by taking advantage of the transit services that we provide, as well as some of the other operators in the area. And that's really what this integration of the two authorities is really all about. So this slide says a lot. It looks better when it's on a big projector. If you turn to slide 9, again, everyone focuses on these outward operations, but really CERTA is not only a toll operator, but it's also a financing mechanism for the state. So we are work closely with DOT on all of the P3 projects. That financing passes through us. It does not have to be a toll facility. A perfect example of that is the 285-400 interchange project. There's no tolls associated with that whatsoever, but because it's P3 financing, CERTA is serving as both the financing and the contracting conduit. We literally hold the construction contract for that. DOT does all the day-to-day project management. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if many of you weren't aware of that. We don't emphasize it because, again, we're just providing a service on behalf of DOT. It is a DOT project, and quite frankly, if we were to try to push the fact that CERTA is holding the contract, people would inherently think there's a toll associated with it. But again, we're a financing mechanism. P3 is one part, but the infrastructure bank is another part. And it's why that program sits at CERTA. So the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank is a revolving loan and grant program. Over the past 2 years, we've spent a lot of time trying to put more emphasis on the loan side. Everyone seems to like grants more than loans for some reason. But to date, we've had 4 rounds of applications and awards. 63 projects have received awards, totaling $82 million in either grants and loans. But the combined value of the 63 projects that have moved forward is over $375 million. What you see on the map on that slide is the location of projects in the 4th round. As you can see, there's a heavy concentration in the metro Atlanta area, but we are also proud of the fact that you're starting to see more awards happen outside the metro area. We're spending a lot of time working with either ACCG, GMA, really almost anyone that'll listen to us to talk about this program and try to explain it to others. A reason for the concentration in the metro area is really twofold. When this program was first started in 2010, the original seed funding came from money that was earmarked for community improvement districts. And so they were the early recipients, quite frankly, based on the color of money or the funding that was available. And they have continued to submit very strong applications. If you're not familiar with CIDs or this program, what typically people request through the infrastructure bank is that last mile of funding. And so the CIDs have literally come with money on the table asking for money to finish out the last leg of funding, of the funding stack to move the projects forward. That has been a challenge outside of the metro area where even though CIDs can be formed, CIDs generate money by self-taxing the property values of their members, and obviously there's just a difference in the real estate property values outside of the metro area. But we spend, like I said, we spend a lot of time still marketing on both the loan side and the grant side. If you look at slide 10, the Go Transit Capital Program, but 2 sessions ago, the General Assembly provided $75 million in GEO bond funding to be used for transit needs statewide. We were able to award that across 9 different recipients for 11 projects. And you can see, obviously, there are transit needs in the metro area, and there were many awards there, but there were also awards in Chatham County for Chatham Area Transit. That's the transit system in Savannah, as well as in Albany. Albany is building a multimodal transit station where services from that area can come and people can switch from one county service to another in their area. We also saw some very innovative projects in the award. University of Georgia is awarding and purchasing some all-electric buses, zero-emission buses. Chatham County is also looking at that. MARTA received an award for to update their audiovisual information system. Probably doesn't sound that sexy at first, but this is the system that would not only tell people what time buses and trains are arriving in the station, but in the event of emergency will provide directions and information. So it's a dynamic system. It also has the capability to tie in with all the other regional providers. So if you arrive on a MARTA train and a Greta bus is arriving, that information will also be available. So some very innovative uses to the money, and we're looking forward to seeing those projects come to fruition. Last but not least, on slide 11, just wanted to reemphasize the importance of our rehab program. We have to continue to invest in these buses so that they are safe and reliable, and that's one of our key internal programs. As we look to the future, and we look at all the construction that's going to happen with GDOT's MMIP program and like 285-400. Express is going to serve a vital need in helping people get through and help hopefully mitigate some of the construction congestion. And then looking to the future plans, one of the things that we are studying internally is the potential for future service to the airport. So we have the world's busiest airport, and with the exception of the MARTA line that runs to it, there's no public transit access. Whenever I talk about this, a lot of people focus on, for business travelers, they can see the need. But honestly, it's equally or potentially as much an economic development project. There's a lot of, the airport's a 24/7 operation. A lot of the workers who work the concessions, et cetera, a lot of them come from just the city of Atlanta because they're on the MARTA line. What we would potentially be able to do by providing service from these 30 park and rides is open up the talent pool to the airport so they can look at people from Cobb, Gwinnett, south of the city, Henry County, to provide access to those jobs. It's another job center that right now our service and quite frankly no road-based transit service can even tap into. So it's something that we're exploring. So that's it for prepared comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do I have any questions? Representative Watson.
Just curious on the rehab program. You said 250,000 per bus. You have to do that every 4 years.
250,000 to 290,000. The older buses need more work, so that's the higher price tag. But it's either that or look at replacing them, and the replacement cost is $680,000 to about $750,000 a bus. So basically, for spending less than half the cost of a new bus, we're hoping to extend the useful life another 4.5 to 6 years.
When you've already used them 10 years?
Yes, or more. I mean, the oldest buses are model year 2004, and they've been on the road since 2004.
That's 12 years, and then you could extend it 4.5 years.
I was just doing the math, and I was like, well, if you spend 250, every 4 years on just say 30 buses, you're gonna spend $22.5 million. If you go buy 30 brand new buses at $600,000, that's only $18 million.
Well, a couple of things. You're right. It's definitely a pay now or pay later. We look at it this way. For a smaller upfront capital investment, we can stretch the life and have more time to try to plan for the eventual replacement, because you can't keep rehabbing them. Once we do this major overhaul, at that point the chassis, once your chassis or frame goes, you're
why not
done.
go on like he said and buy new? I still don't understand why you wouldn't buy new ones.
It's 166 buses times
Do all of them
600
need
to 700,000.
You don't need to get on a rotating system where you replace so many each year.
We would love to. We'd love to have a capital program that provide us enough funding to buy new buses on a regular basis and keep cycling the fleet. That just hasn't been the setup to date. We have lots of numbers internally where we look at different scenarios. That would be the ideal. But I don't want you to think it's a lack of planning or asking. There's information going back where we've been looking at this problem, and quite frankly, it's a problem faced by most transit operators. It's just such a huge capital amount up front, and that's why in the $75 million Go Transit, you saw several people are using that to get the capital to refresh their fleet. So but we're always happy to look at capital funding to try to jumpstart the replacement. So.
And just one follow-up. In the consolidation, have you seen any savings there, really consolidating the two agencies?
Yes, we've certainly seen some savings. We had to make some tough decisions. Before I started this, I had 2 CFOs, et cetera. So we had some positions that we eliminated. You haven't seen, the work wasn't cut in half because we were also in the middle of expansion with the roads. But the savings that we did, for example, in our customer service, we had planned to hire new reps. By combining, we did 2 things. We were able to utilize the people that we had on one side, cross-train them, and not have to hire as many new bodies. And at the same time, we also fixed what we call the bubble problem. Whenever we did this major service change or open up a road, calls spike. We've reduced the number of temporary workers that we're going to have because we already had staff to fill it.
So you can't tell us how much you save by combining the 2 agencies, there's no?
Yeah, I mean, we have some personnel savings, but I'll be honest, it's not a lot of money going forward. What we're hoping to do over the next year when we physically move all the staff together, because right now we also have 2 set of copier leases. We'll start realizing those savings. We have 2 different cell phone contracts. And what we saw when we did some of that is we might have the same provider, and we joke internally, it's like we both went to the same car dealership, bought the same car, but sometimes we paid, relatively substantially different pricing. So we're able to look at what's the best copier lease contract agreements and do all of that. So,
any other questions? Representative Tankersley.
I think you're going to be very pleased with it. The fact that we've added new lanes and they're physically separated, it's going to work very well. We had we're at the biennial, and we've done a lot of these field events looking for people to sign up, and members of the General Assembly and the other attendees. We signed up 80 people in that day and a half.
I got mine.
So,
Sam, did you get yours?
Yeah.
I might use it on the way home today.
There you go. Well, thank you, and anything we can do to, again, further spread the word. ACCG and GMA have been very helpful in getting the word out.
Thank you. Representative Estration.
Director, I just had one quick question. I'm familiar with a slide you used in the past showing one motor coach and how many vehicles that takes off the road. Could you just comment on
Sure.
that?
So we have a seating capacity of 54 people in a coach, but our average ridership on our routes is somewhere between 30 to 45, and we've joked with putting bumper stickers on the back that says, you don't like being stuck behind the bus, try being stuck behind 45 additional cars, because that's what each one of those is taking off. And it really speaks again to, and it really was the governor's office who approached us with the idea of integrating the 2 more. But the stat we had provided to the governor's office was on I-85 in the morning, only 2% of the vehicles are express coaches, either ours or Gwinnett County's, but they account for 26% of the people that are moved through that lane. And we're doing that with still additional capacity on the buses. So the changes we did in September and other strategies we're pursuing is to try to get more and more people to fill up those seats. And I haven't forgotten our conversation about trying to come up with some additional incentives to get people to try. We actually did a free afternoon on the 27th, December 27th. Now, admittedly, it's a light ridership day, but we're just trying to test the concept. And there's some other programs internally we're trying to explore with commuter credits, but we recognize that just raising the toll rates is perceived as a stick approach. We're trying to come up with some carrots and other incentives to get people to try transit. And so you'll be hearing more from us as we try to develop those programs.
Thank you.
And one thing, when you do get those figures, this will sort of be a one-year savings combining the agencies, right? We'd just sort of like to know how much you save by combining the agencies.
All right.
Any other questions? Now, do they have any, there's nothing they need in the budget. You don't need any ask in 2017 amended budget.
We have no asks in the amended budget.
And I think you sort of explained what you wanted in 2018 budget too.
We're always looking at our capital program.
I know y'all gonna be busy the end of the year, and we appreciate y'all coming, and hopefully we won't have to ask y'all to come back.
Okay.
Because I know y'all gonna be busy opening up all these toll roads.
Yeah, January, opening up a toll road during the session in winter, that was a great idea.
But y'all are doing a great job.
Yeah, we're going to keep our heads down and pray for good weather.
And thank you for agreeing to take both of these agencies and put them together.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Any way we can help y'all, let us know, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to